Great, thank you. It's 9:40 and I call the January 11th, 2024 meeting of the SDCERS Board of Administration's Business and Governance Committee to order. As our committee chair, Bobby Spoon, is absent today, I'm filling in as interim chair. Rosie, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mr. Interim Chair, we do have a quorum for today's meeting, as you saw already mentioned, with all members present with the exception of Roberta Spoon.
Great. Before we move to public comment, I'd like to recognize Marcelle Rossman. She prepares for her retirement in 31 and almost a half hour. Marcelle, on behalf of the committee, we'd like to extend our gratitude for your service to SDCERS and specifically the excellent staff work supporting this committee. Thank you and best wishes in your retirement.
Thank you.
Moving on to Section 3, public comment. Rosie, do we have public comment today?
No, Mr. Interim Chair, we do not have any public comment for today's meeting.
Moving to Section 4, business and governance action items. We have 4 action items on today's agenda. Our first action item is staff's recommendation to issue a request for proposal for actuarial consulting services. Greg, would you please introduce this action item?
Yes, thank you. There we go. SDCERS has a policy of going out to bid or rebidding its major service contracts on a 5-year basis. We have the actuary falls into that category, our actuarial consulting services, and Chiron is our plan actuary. And their contract was actually up 2 years ago. But the board decided at that time that because we were going through the reopening of the city plans and Chiron had a history of being an integral business partner in figuring out how to do that and doing the calculations, that we would extend their contract for 2 years. So we're currently in year 7 of their 5-year contract, and that contract is coming to an end as of June 30th of 2024. So we would like, in accordance with our board policies, to go out and conduct an RFP for actuarial consulting services for another 5-year period, which will include experience studies. So we're asking the Business and Governance Committee to recommend that to the board. Also, staff is really asking the board to rely on your professional staff to do the heavy lifting on that RFP process. So we would put together the RFP, screen candidates, and bring them back to the full board for consideration. So again, the committee can take that course or another course, depending on how much time and energy you'd like to put into the RFP search process. As a side note, we also do audits of our actuarial consultant, and it is time to do an audit of our actuarial services consultant. So following this RFP, we'll do another RFP for an actuarial auditor to do an audit of the either if the incumbent continues on or if we get a new firm, an audit of that firm.
All right. Would any committee member like to speak on this? All right, so we need a motion. Moved by Elvin, sorry. Moved by Elvin and seconded by Paul. Please vote.
And with all votes in, Mr. Interim Chair, this motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Rosie. Our second action item is hearing officer's recommendation to grant the appeal of Jay Farrington. Susan?
Good morning. What you have before you is the hearing officer's recommendation granting the appeal of Jay Farrington. This went to hearing on August 22nd, 2023. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from the committee members?
I have
Chris?
comments, but not questions.
Comments?
Or maybe it's a question. I guess it is. Susan, when I went through the judge's ruling, he was pretty harsh. He said we were wrong on the law. He said our argument was silly, a variety of other things along those lines. So the history of this case, as I recall, is is this person worked as a police officer for 10 years for the city or something like that, then moves over to the county and becomes a DA investigator. Am I right? And so he works there, and at some point during his tenure, or at the end of his tenure there, he receives 2 pay enhancements which are at issue, right? And I won't get into the specifics of them because that's some of the argument and so on. But SDCERS, the county group, recognized those as being pensionable, and SDCERS' feeling, at least at first blush, was they're not pensionable, right? So that was the issue at hand. When this judge looks at this, he's not just saying you're wrong, SDCERS, he's saying you're real wrong, the way I read this. And what concerns me about it is he has had to hire an attorney who I'm assuming he's going to pay a significant amount of money for. It will ultimately improve his pension by a few $100s a month or something like that, as I recall. So he has no real recourse to get back, as far as I know, the money that the attorney cost. And I'm just wondering if we were so far off the mark from this judge's perspective in the first place, why were we challenging this employee?
Do you mind if I take that?
Yeah, no,
Yes,
totally.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I say I'd like to take that because Susan is charged with presenting a position, not deciding whether that position is appropriate. So the position that staff presented at the hearing was derived from prior fiduciary counsel and prior general counsel. It's something that we've been advised on and how to deal with this reciprocal salary information, and so it was presented to the judge. I agree with you that the judge used harsh but very persuasive language, and we do look at that. We look at how we're administering not just Mr. Farrington's benefit, but others like it. And so as a result of the assistance of the hearing officer in this case, and also working with fiduciary counsel, we had our fiduciary counsel, Reed Smith, look at this case, look at the position, especially in light of the recommendation you heard. And fiduciary counsel, the new fiduciary counsel gave us new direction that concurs with the hearing officer's recommendation, specifically that there's a provision in our plan that is unique to other plans, like Stillman that were dealt with in the 1937 Act case, that says, SDCERS, you shouldn't be removing these pay codes. There's some other language in the opinion that staff doesn't agree with or fiduciary counsel doesn't agree with, namely trying to see if it's paid by the member, to the member, for the member. That really isn't a distinction that relates to our case. But with that new advice, we think it's come out to the better conclusion. And I know it's a process. Sometimes these legal issues take too long, I think, but it's a process that we get to a better result. And so today, I think staff is very happy with approving this hearing officer's recommendation and then moving forward and making sure we administer the benefits consistently.
Thanks, Johnny. And
Thank you, Susan.
I mean, yeah, thanks. And it's really good to hear. I would just note a couple of things. First of all, I think for every person, I think most people, certainly that was my case, who come to SDCERS when they're about to retire, says, hey, what's my benefit going to be? SDCERS calculates it, and they more or less say, okay. My guess is that for everyone in a same or similar circumstance, this guy, this person, who actually says, I'm getting an attorney, there was 10 or 15 out there who just accepted whatever they were told. And I worry about the disadvantage to them, lifelong disadvantage, financial. And I worry about the disadvantage to him in the sense of we've determined that our calculations or our approach was wrong, which is fine. I mean, everybody makes mistakes. But he literally pays the price, right, for that to be brought forward to us. So I just wanted to express those concerns, and one of the things I just wanted to read into the record, if there's a record, is at the end of his decision, the Judge Sheridan Reed said, longstanding California pension case law requires all doubts or ambiguities to be resolved in favor of, in this case, this individual. And it says, he says, and he quotes this from case law, from an appellate case law from 1943. Courts have repeatedly declared that pension laws are to be liberally construed, and if any doubt remains in regard to the proper constitution of a pension statute, that doubt must be resolved in favor of the person claiming the right to the pension. And I just think that it's important that we keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, may I have a motion and a second? Moved by Paul Kaufman, seconded by Paul Lotz. Please vote.
With all votes in, Mr. Interim Chair, this motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Rosie. Our third action item is staff's recommendation to amend the committee's charter and investment committee's charter to delegate authority to the investment committee to initiate, amend, and terminate contractual relationships with investment managers. Karina, would you please introduce this action item?
Yes, thank you so much, Tom. As you may recall, we had a retreat in August of 2023 to discuss the delegation of the selection of investment managers to the investment committee, and a consensus was formed at this retreat that we should go down this road because the expertise for investments lies with the investment committee. So this is consistent with best practices, as was found in our study conducted by Curcio Webb. And after this retreat, we revised the language for the committee's charter and investments committee charter. And we went to the investment committee and received the go-ahead to approach the board with this language, which was approved, and it has to deal with the initiation, amendment, and termination of contractual relationships with investment managers, that this be delegated to the investment committee and was approved by the board. And we are here before you today because obviously the changes to governing documents fall under the purview of this committee. So we wanted to make this final with the Business and Governance Committee today. And unless you have any questions, there's the red line version in your packet. I'm happy to address them.
Elvin?
Just to clarify and how I'm reading it, so the investment committee will be able to contractually obligate SDCERS with the investment advisor and terminate those contracts on a go-forward basis. It does not then need to go to the full board for a final approval, so investment committee can take it from there.
That is exactly correct. And in selection is also this language with regard to termination. So the investment committee decides both which manager, for example, if we were going to terminate one strategy, move to another, which manager we should select entails the selection of that new manager as well as the termination of the outgoing manager.
And does that also mean that future or special meetings or meetings that need to happen quickly? And I love this, by the way, because the investment committee can then pivot
Yes.
faster, adapt to the market faster, all that kind of stuff. So I just want to make sure that if it's a special meeting, not a regular called out meeting in the future, that they're still able to do the same process on a go-forward basis.
Yes, in fact, there's currently flexibility. Should something arise where we need to take immediate action, for the staff to do so with the consent of the investment chair, and then have that action ratified by the broader investment committee and then brought to the board. But what happens here is that now the investment committee has the final say on the selection of the manager. So that's exactly correct.
And how many people are on the investment committee?
I believe we currently have 6.
6?
Yes.
And how many people are on the board?
I think that's
13.
13-member board.
Oh, good. Okay.
All right.
Any other questions or comments? All right, then I'll need a motion and a second. Moved by Paul Kaufman, seconded by Elvin. Please vote.
With all votes in, this motion passes 4-0 with 1 no.
Thank you, Rosie. Our fourth action item is staff's recommendation to amend the Board of Administration Charter, board member responsibilities and core competencies, ethical conduct, compliance and training policy, Public Records Act policy, and Division 10 of the board rules, administrative hearing other than disability. Johnny, would you please introduce this action item?
Sure, Tom. Thank you. And thank you, committee, for continuing to work with us as our best practice to review your governance materials at least every 3 years. So before you is a lot of different policies. Staff is recommending changes to just a few of them as outlined in my memo, as well as the red line attachment. I do want to highlight 2 of the recommended changes, one concerning the Board Administration Charter. We wanted to make it clear to the board members, to you, that you're not compensated for this, so thank you for that. But in addition to that, you do receive reimbursement for expenses that you incur in your job here. Should you get hurt, you're able to take advantage of the city's workers' compensation benefits. And you also have defense and indemnity should you be sued personally under Government Code Section 995. I do also want to highlight one change to Division 10, which is the hearing process for administrative hearings in front of SDCERS and the hearing officers, similar to what we just looked at in Farrington a bit. And we wanted to make it clear that the board should only consider documents that are timely received under your board rules. We've struggled as staff with members giving us things at the last second, throwing papers on the desk, and we just want it to be organized to keep the record straight, to keep you sane, because these packages are 1,500 pages. I'd hate to give you another email or an additional document. Any questions, though, on anything that I discussed or anything other suggested changes in any of these documents?
Chris?
Yep. And I submitted my thoughts to Johnny before the meeting, just so you know we had some discussion about it. On the benefits administration responsibilities, 8D, there's a proposal here to adjust our policy to remove the requirement to prescribe rules for periodic physical reexamination of any member who has been retired for disability. So currently, the policy says we have to, right? Provide rules for those. We discussed this at a prior meeting and determined we don't have any, right?
Don't have any.
Rules providing for periodic physical examinations.
I'm not sure that we don't have any rules. We follow a procedure, but you're right that the board and staff have not adopted a rule that says, pursuant to the plan documents, periodic examination means every year, every 2 years. We don't have that.
Okay. And my discomfort with this is that the municipal code, which we're obligated to follow, says the Board of Administration shall prescribe rules and regulations providing for periodical physical examination of any member who's disabled. And I know that I had brought this up in the past, and Greg spoke to the city attorney's office, and they gave an opinion which I would generally characterize as saying we have latitude in this regard, or something along those lines. It was a long opinion. My only concern is that I don't think we have the latitude to have policies that are inconsistent with the municipal code. And I accept the idea that the city attorney says, well, regardless of the municipal code and regardless of your policies, you kind of don't have to do this if you don't want to. I mean, essentially.
kind of rehashing this.
Yeah, go ahead.
This argument. So the question came down to, how do you define periodic? Is a period of one periodic? Or are you doing it every 6 months? Are you doing it every year? And so, staff is of the mind that we have integrity as one of our core values, and so we do want to follow the plan design. And so we said, well, if it would be good to say the plan sponsor is responsible for the plan design and what it means, let's ask them, what do they think periodic is? Is SDCERS approach within their understanding of periodic? And they said yes. So to me, that was kind of the gist was, should we be testing these people more often than our current procedures? That was kind of my understanding of the issue.
Right, and I agree, but I would just point out that the sponsor is the city. And that was an opinion of the city attorney, and that's fine. That's okay, and I don't have a problem with us following the guidance of the deputy city attorney. I'm only suggesting that our policy, at least as written, should not veer from what the plan sponsor document says. That's my suggestion.
Okay.
So I would suggest, I would move, number one, to approve this with, without that strike of periodic and RE there. And then to continue, well, I have another question. What's the process for voting on that? Right, for people to discuss that motion and vote on it.
Robert's Rules of Orders is a guideline.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Robert's Rules of Order is a guideline. We don't follow
Okay.
it strictly, so we don't have to have multiple layers. So you can
Okay.
offer an amendment.
Okay. So and the other area of concern I had was there in the existing policy, and this is not a change to the policy, it says, quote, based on these criteria, and this is a totally separate issue, the board delegates the SDCERS General Counsel the authority to add and remove hearing officers assigned to SDCERS pool of hearing officers. So what does that actually mean? So what that actually means, as I would articulate it, is when we go to one of these cases where it goes before a judge, the judge is chosen by sort of a random draw from the group that we contract with to provide judges, right? And the existing language in the policy allows either party to file a peremptory challenge, I think, right? So either, if a given judge is selected, either SDCERS could say, nope, we don't accept that judge, and the appellant, if we would call it the appellant, the person challenging it would have that right as well. That's an existing piece of the policy. But what this piece of the policy does, is it allows the SDCERS General Counsel to say, that judge can never rule on our cases again, right? And so, and my concern is, I think that gives us too much latitude in what should be a fair hearing process. In other words, let's say we're ruled against 3 times by Judge Jones, and we say, we don't want that guy around anymore because he keeps ruling against us. I think that provides too much latitude. So my suggestion there, I guess this is a second piece of my motion, is to eliminate that sentence. Based on these criteria, the board delegates to SDCERS General Counsel the authority to add and remove hearing officers assigned to the SDCERS pool of hearing officers. The peremptory challenge would still exist on every single case for both parties. So that's my motion. Thank you. And otherwise to approve. So I suppose unless there's a second, there's nothing to talk about.
Tom, would you mind if I
go
comment
for it.
on Mr. Brewster's amendments? Chris, I will not die in the first hill. We are obviously not trying to not follow the municipal code. We're just trying to make it more clear of what we do. But I understand that the municipal code says that we will periodically look at retirees to make sure that they continue to qualify for that benefit. Our staff practice has been to look at them if we have reason to look at them more than just annually subjecting them to a day at the doctor's office. So I am in support of that motion if you want. The second one is really a question of delegation and possibly a question of integrity of the general counsel. Judges retire. These are all very old people. They've been practicing on the bench, like the judge that you just looked at. She's been practicing 35 years on the bench. They retire. They become retired judges. They help out with administrative hearings like this. I share that with you because they don't last very long. So we constantly add new judges. That's part of my job, to make sure they're qualified to that, and I add them. That is a delegation of responsibility that the board has given to me. If the board wants to do that, I suppose they could. Historically, I have never seen that to be the case, but it's your hearings. As far as removing the judge, the idea that I or any general counsel would remove a judge because they kept ruling against us, I think it goes against the integrity of what our staff tries to do. Again, in my email to you, I have never removed a judge. You just saw an opinion from a judge who called staff's position silly and just completely wrong. I have no problem with the judge speaking of that. In fact, I think that helps our system run better. And so, again, I think it's a delegation. If you want to have the responsibility of removing judges, then I invite the board to do that as well. But as it's gone, I've done this for 12 years, and we've been able to be okay without removing any judges or problems with adding any judges. One suggestion that I did give to you in our correspondence, which I like, is that if I were to add or remove a judge, that I would report that to the committee. And then in doing that, I think, Chris, you could have that oversight and say, hey, why did you do that? Why did you not do that? And correct any errors that you perceive on my end.
I'm okay with that. I would amend my motion accordingly, if I may. Sorry, Greg.
Oh, I just wanted to add, not here at SDCERS, but at a prior pension plan I worked for, there was 40 to 60 disability cases per month. And we had lots and lots of hearings. And we use lots and lots of hearing officers. And with hearing officers, some of them are very timely and some aren't. And so there was conditions, had nothing to do with their decisions. They just weren't timely. They weren't processing their cases. Their reports, you would tell them, these are our rules, and they wouldn't follow our rules. They would follow workers' comp rules. So there is times where you have an administrative hearing judge that just doesn't understand our book of business or isn't responsive, and they're overworked or for whatever reason, that you just go, we can't do business anymore. So there is a reason to remove a judge, but it has nothing to do with what they're deciding. It's just more, are they a good vendor or not? So those conditions do exist, and I'm glad that we've never had to use that here at SDCERS, at least while I've been here. Thank you.
There's one more question from Alvin.
All right.
Is there any requirements for the hearing officer to understand or have a criteria of understanding before they become a hearing officer? Is there
Yes,
a filter
absolutely.
process?
Yes, thank you, Alvin. The rule itself says they are qualified to be, they're first a judge in good standing in the state of California, so that there's a lot of the requirement for it. They are also given directions from the adjudicative agency, the agency that we contract with, that says these are the elements, these are the municipal code that we follow, and that the judge will agree to follow those rules versus who knows what else. So there are some requirements.
So where are those requirements listed out? And do we have our own requirements for the vendor that, in my mind, I see it as you've contracted with a vendor.
Yes.
The vendor then finds hearing officers that fit the criteria that we're looking for.
Yes.
And then those people are then I wanted to say serve up, but it's not served up. It's a list of people that you can pick from to choose from for as a hearing officer for whatever case that may be.
Yes, they're rotated in.
Where is that list that the vendor then goes out to find hearing officers of retired judges to be these hearing officers?
How do the agencies find their retired judges?
Yeah. Is there criteria that you give them, or do they just go out and say, hey, no?
I don't.
Oh,
They,
okay.
What ends up happening a lot is the judges retire and they look for further income, and they offer their services to different administrative agencies like that. And then those administrative agencies announce those judges as being available. And when they're available, we ask them to serve on our board, or serve this board.
So there's not necessarily a requirement to understand benefits, disabilities in this business per se. They're
Yeah,
just judges in good standing.
Yes, with the caveat that I think I have not asked that, for instance, a patent judge be on the hearing because they don't have any experience. But if they've had experience with civil disputes, that's essentially the bar.
I just want to clarify what the weeding out process is, and so it doesn't sound like there's much of a weeding
For the
out
judges?
process. Yes. Because
That's about it.
you don't do the weeding out process.
No.
The vendor finds these people in good standing that then provides you the list.
Yes.
So John, just to clarify the mechanics of this, so we contract with some entity
Yes.
that offers up judges on a random basis to us for these cases. So we don't pick the judge. The agency does. We contract with the agency who puts the judge forward.
With the exception of what I said, that when they announce new judges, if they have some civil judge experience, that is my weeding out process. Then I ask them to be on our contract.
Right.
And then depending on if the judge wants to, because some judges only want to do this hourly rate versus that hourly rate, and then the adjudicative agency and that judge decide to work for SDCERS.
Thank you. So, oh, sorry.
Go for it.
No, I just amending my motion to what was said was to approve all of this with the exception of that issue of the change in the periodic, and adding that you will report to us if a judge is dismissed, so to speak.
Great, thank you. Would you mind, I will write that up, and perhaps at the board meeting I can show it in red line so that
Thank
way
you.
the board understands what happened today. Thank you, Chris.
All right, Chris, would you like to move that?
Yes, that was my motion. Oh, sorry.
And I'll need a second. All right, moved by Chris, seconded by Elvin. Please vote.
And with all votes in, Mr. Interim Chair, this motion passes 5-0.
Great, so we finished our committee action items, and there's no informational items. We'd like to move on to reports. Cynthia, please provide your Member Services Division report.
I would be glad to. Happy New Year, everyone. The Member Services team has a number of annual mailings that we are required to send to our members, and of course, we want to educate them. And I just want to say we already pulled off 2 of those in the short time that January has been here. So I want to shout out to all the teams. So all that we do is governed by the Internal Revenue Service. It's part of what makes things fun around here. And I love it that I can quote some of this stuff now. So Internal Revenue Code Section 415B dictates the maximum amount of defined benefit plans, such as SDCERS, can pay to an individual member each year. Every single member, when they go to retire, their benefit is screened by our actuary with a lot of work done by Benefits Administration and by Finance. And every year, a small number of our members, I'm going to say about 60, have a pension amount that must be paid from 2 funds, the SDCERS Trust Fund and the Preservation of Benefits Fund that is set up for each of the 3 plan's sponsors. Very importantly, this does not reduce the amount of their benefit. It's just a tax law that says certain situations, they got to be paid out of the 2 funds, okay? Now, the limit depends on a number of factors, including the member's age at retirement, actuarially determined value of the retirement benefit, including drop. Now, what the member needs to know is, what if I need to do with my taxes or little things like that? So member services job is over the holidays when Ben Admin and Finance are working hard to get those numbers finished up. First day those things are ready, Victoria Fedelizo on our staff runs a whole process where she creates individual letters for each of these members to tell them what's going on and to inform them how much money is going to be paid out of each of the two funds. Now, in reality, if we didn't tell them anything, that money would still show up as a deposit on their paycheck, and a whole bunch of people would probably never notice. But we would not do that because we want to be in compliance and we want to let them know what's going on. The one piece is that there is a separate tax withholding for the two amounts, and that's the main thing we tell them about in our letter is look at your tax things. And we even have a really cool how-to guide of how to update your taxes on our member portal. So we get that out lickety-split at the beginning of the year in case they want to change those taxes for January, which is something everyone looks at anyway. So I just want to give a big shout out to Victoria Fedelizo for getting that done while I was still on vacation. Hooray. The second annual mailing is, we've got some people who live out of the country. And it's a very small amount. It went even down less than 10 this year. But we also have internal revenue guidelines that we have to properly withhold taxes and have certain information. So we have to have Form W-9 to pay a U.S. citizen who lives outside the U.S., and we must have a current Form W-8-BEN. Took me a couple years to figure out that one. That's for non-resident aliens claiming tax treaty benefits. So we must withhold the federal taxes for citizens and non-resident aliens living abroad, and we have to have an updated form every 3 years. So we have a process that goes on throughout the year because we have to pay attention to this when someone might pass away or other situations. But we do this annual mailing to make sure that we're catching everybody. And this was one that we started probably about 10 years ago, and it was kind of a fun one because when it first started, it was so incredibly confusing because I didn't know what that W-8-BEN was. And now that Johnny and a number of people on our team, we've worked very hard and worked with our outside tax counsel, and I feel like we have a really good process because you get a little confused when you get that letter when you're happily living over in France and you're like, what? So we tried to make it very, very user-friendly, and we have excellent compliance. So our communications manager, Jessica Taylor, is in charge of that. Did a great job completing it. All done beginning of the week. Woohoo! Very pleased with that. So that's my excitement for January. And finally, I would like to say, of course, a huge thank you and congratulations to my longtime mentor, boss, and friend, Marcel Voorhees-Rossmann. I like to call her MVR. And I also would like to give a big congratulations to Sandra Clausen, and I know you will continue to be incredibly impressed with her as you get to see her presenting at this committee going forward. So thank you all for serving. I appreciate you all, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Any questions from the committee?
So, Sandra, there's only 10 of our members that live outside the country? Is that what you said?
I know that people get Sandra and I confused. It's the tall woman thing. Cynthia, I'm just
Did I
teasing.
say that?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
teasing.
Sorry about that.
I just wanted to make sure Sandra knew
All right,
that I know the
geez,
difference
Cynthia,
between the two of us.
we've known each other for
Yeah,
40
no.
years.
No,
Sorry
at one
about
point,
that.
it was interesting. It was 16. Honestly, one of them passed away earlier this year. So, but people move back and forth. It's fascinating. I know all their names. I know where they've lived.
Man.
But yeah, so it's surprising.
I'm surprised more people aren't,
Yep.
But anyway,
Yep.
that's the way it is.
Cynthia, I did see a big spike in the call wait time and also the amount of calls coming in. Is there a reason
Oh,
so many
most
people
certainly.
are calling?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much, Tom. Kind of thought I was going to escape before you asked that one, but I was totally ready because I appreciate how you always pay attention to that. Oh, most definitely. And we knew it and we were anticipating it. And I would say I am so proud of this staff, and it was even better than we thought. So the two quick reasons are to explain is health is humongous this time of year. You might recall big conversation last year, which I'll make really short, is how there was a change in the time of open enrollment. It used to be in June. It used to go crazy nutso in June. We wouldn't let people take vacations because you had to answer those calls. Then it was switched to November, beyond our control. And November is also the time we have to do another mailing. Marcel has written many wonderful reports about how this created an incredible nexus of a lot. So we had, I don't know, I didn't even bring my numbers up here, 2,500 calls. Keeping in mind, the health team is going, because there's maybe 3 of them, they're going nuts. They are processing, answering all these complicated questions, meeting with people in the lobby. Your little teeny call center over there is doing the very best they can to answer these questions. And the compassion in my heart is great because people get stressed about their health care. And when they start talking to you about it, it's going to keep going. There's going to be a number of questions and maybe a discussion about current ailments. And so there is a customer service factor in there. So it was as expected, and we just worked hard our best to help sure that we kept them fed and watered while they were answering all these calls. And so basically, when you look at it, when we have the health time of the year, you get up around 2,500 calls, which is at least a good 700 more than the usual. And the call wait times are obviously not, the current ones for this month aren't in there. We'd have that for you next time. But honestly, it's just a really crazy busy time. And so everyone is getting helped. Everyone is getting their payments made. It is getting there. I think sometimes it's a nervousness thing where you can submit to us and you'll get an automatic reply that it was received, but then they call to make sure it was received. So the volume kind of almost doubles and triples itself, even though we try a number of things. But what's most important, we're getting everybody taken care of, giving them lots of love, absolutely tracking every phone call so that we can help them out. And definitely things might need to be escalated or anything. But I will always appreciate you, Tom, for looking for those call wait times, because I know you support the employees and the members. And so thank you for asking. Yep, it's been a whirlwind. And honestly, yesterday was the deadline for one of the health requirements. And hoping it'll slow down a little bit this week so they can just go back to processing. Thank you so much for always watching.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, random question. Maybe this is a Greg and Johnny question too. Is there a need for presenters to be wearing their mask while they're presenting? Because that seems torturous, what Cynthia's going through right now.
It's okay. I'm fine.
It is torturous and there is a need. So
Okay, understood. Thank you.
unless we can drink coffee while we talk, and that doesn't work very well.
Don't you think my penguin mask is kind of fun?
Super cute, super
Not
cute.
as good as Marcel's.
You're unusually muted when you're wearing that.
This could be a reason that we're doing this.
So if I could just add some additional comments with regards to our call wait times. This is something that Cynthia, Marcel, and I talk about all the time. This workload was something we identified over a year ago and have been working with the plan sponsor to say, hey, we're going to have this problem. How do we fix it? And we anticipated it was going to be fixed before we had this kind of crisis, but government, it didn't happen. So we really triaged and did the best we could, supported staff the best we could, helped our members the best we could, and went through it. We anticipate we will not have this same nexus again next year. We think that the solution will come in the coming fiscal year, and we can avoid that double stacking of the workload. So,
Thank you, Greg.
thanks.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you very much.
All right, Marcel, would you please provide your final Benefits Administration Division report?
I would love to. So I'm going to add something I wasn't going to talk about because it just came up. On page 5 of my report, there's this lovely chart, you can see, and you will see that retiree health calls quadruple in November. So that is what you just saw. It increases the wait time. And we've, as Greg said, we've looked at lots of options on how to handle that, but once we had open enrollment, Medicare changes, and all of our members who have privately secured resetting January 1, you get all those phone calls coming in, and when the city changed open enrollment, we said, you are creating a perfect storm for us, and it did. So we've really worked hard to try and get that down. We added a lot more people in health, brought some people from other divisions to help with the health so that hopefully some of the calls from member services could get more quickly over to health people, but there's just no way around it, unfortunately. But in regards to hopefully that not being the issue next year, the city is still working with the vendor on the new health reimbursement vendor. And I'm looking at Sandra because I think the last update we got was that they thought it was going to go to council February. Okay, so that's the last update we've received from the city is they anticipate taking this vendor to council in February. And then we're looking at least a 6-month transition happening from there, which still gets us more or less out of the health business before next December. So hopefully that will help. There's 2 other things that I wanted to highlight in my report. Prop B, because it's my favorite thing to talk about, and it still is here. So the city did mail out letters to Phase 3 employees this week. Wow. So these are former city employees. They were employed by the city during the Prop B time, July of 12 through July of 22. And during that time period, they were in a position that would have been eligible for membership if not for Proposition B. So those employees have an option, or former employees now have an option to purchase that time. So it's about 2,000 people. I think it's 2,003 to be exact. And those letters did go out this week. And we actually anticipate, from talking to the city yesterday, they will be hitting mailboxes today and tomorrow. So that call wait time is going to go right back up. Even though the letters say do not call SDCERS because we can't answer the questions, when someone calls into the call center, the first thing we do is identify them, and these people are not members. So we can't identify them, and we can't give them any information because they're not members. My team does not have any information about who they are, how many years of service they may be able to buy, what it's going to cost them. That's all being handled by risk management. So I do expect, though, there will be some calls starting from that. The other piece that we've still been working on are the Phase 2 stragglers, and they are still there. We're at about 105 right now, and these are people that either had very, very unusual circumstances. I was looking at one last night. They separated from the city 3 times. They were hired, they left, they came back during Prop B, they left, they came back a 3rd time during Prop B, and are still employed. And they've done all sorts of crazy things with their SPSPH funds. It's very complicated contracts to calculate. So it's things like that that are in that main group of them. There is a group of, I think we're at 22 now, that have done something that we didn't anticipate. And when we worked with the city on the municipal code changes, and what started off as a 1-page document from the city ended up being a 5-page document, because we kept saying, well, what about this? What if they do this? What if they do that? And kept adding, trying to capture all the scenarios in the Muni Code. And there are 22 people that beat us. And they came up with a scenario that we did not anticipate. So the city's got to go back to the unions and say, what do I do with these people? How do we handle them? Because there's nothing in the Muni Code that tells us what to do with them. And then we have about 28 people that we're still working with the city. They are contributing to SDCERS. They are a member, but we still need their funds transferred from their SPSPH. So that's the Phase 2 update. Any questions on Prop B?
I just want to comment that I find it absolutely astounding that you were able to administer this so well over this period of time. I mean, it's just like this unbelievable putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. And I just wanted to commend you for all that went through that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And we may call you in retirement about some of these people just to,
Yeah.
make sure we got it right. Thank you.
I honestly thought this would be done before I retired, but not quite. The last thing that I wanted to update you on is the reciprocal salary updates. So this was in my report where what we talked about a little bit earlier. We have updated guidance from Fiduciary Council on how to handle reciprocal salary. I am happy to report there were 62 retirees, and 4 of them had former spouses, so 6 benefits that needed to be updated. They were all updated for the December payroll, so everyone's December check reflected their new benefit amount, and if they were owed retro contribution or retro benefits, that was also paid to them in December. So they've all received a letter that explained what the circumstances were, and their benefits have been updated. Averaged about $134 a person for those a month. Was the average benefit change. And happy to answer any questions you may have on anything else.
Are you sure you don't want to come back provisional?
I think you met my husband and my son. You'd have to clear that with them, so.
Thank you, Marcel.
Thank you.
Michelle, would you please provide the IT division report?
Good morning. I wanted to highlight an update in my committee report that recently the IT division conducted a business impact analysis with the SDCERS management and leadership team. The business impact analysis is also referred to as a BIA, is part of the business continuity plan and is a process to identify the impact to critical business operations as a result of an unexpected event. This exercise is also meant to identify gaps in technology to support the continuity of these critical processes. In 2021, an audit of the business continuity plan was conducted by an external vendor, RSM. They reported that we had a robust plan, but gave several recommendations. We have now incorporated all of those recommendations, including these two directly related to conducting a regular BIA of our continuity plan. They recommended this to identify changes in business processes, business priorities, and technologies. IT is currently analyzing the information collected during the exercise and will determine if any changes are needed to our application or infrastructure strategy to support the continuity of our business. Any significant changes will be considered and incorporated into the IT 3-year strategic plan that our IT management team is currently working on. And that concludes my updates. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Johnny, would you please provide the Legal and Compliance Division report?
Sure, I don't have any prepared remarks, but I will take any questions if you have any on the legal report.
Yeah, Johnny, on the first one, you mentioned you filed a demurrer with leave to amend, which I don't actually really know what that means. But so where is that? That the Court of Appeal sends that back to the original trial court or something?
This is on Conway?
Are you talking
Sorry,
about the
yeah, the
Conway
first
litigation?
one. Yeah. Oh, yeah, the first one there. Yeah.
So you want to know what the process
Yeah.
is
What
right
happens in this case?
This is a long history, if you recall. So this was a case where the trial court, the lowest level court, had agreed with SDCERS that they were not responsible for any of the claims. It went on appeal. The appeal court agreed. Then the California Supreme Court said, we have a related case to immunities we'd like to look at first. And they ruled on the related case. That our case got sent back down to the appellate case with directions to look at how that relates to the other related case. The Court of Appeals said, in light of the related case, why don't the trial court go back and look at that again? So you go do it. So that's where the trial court is now. And so what the courts have allowed them to do is go ahead and file an amended complaint in light of all the procedure that happened. And once that is done, then we will file an appropriate response.
When you say them, you're saying the plaintiffs. They have a chance to refile based on whatever the guidance they think they got from the Supreme Court.
Correct.
Okay. And so they have some time to do that. And then ultimately, is there a hearing or what happens at that point?
Depending on what we file. So they have 30 days from issuance of a remittitor from the trial court to file their amended complaint. We have 30 days from that or 20 days from that to file what we want to. If we file an answer, then we just go through our litigation. If we file a motion, like a demurrer, where we're saying, despite the facts, as a matter of law, the plaintiff cannot prevail, then there will be a motion for that.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnny, it was just nice to see that we came under the fiduciary insurance cost. So that was nice.
Oh, absolutely. Thank
Under
you
the
so
insert.
much. And we continue to work with the broker to give you hard, firm numbers come November as opposed to a range in which I negotiate. Thank you, Tom.
Great. All right. Thank you, Johnny. Moving on. Ted, would you like to present the Finance Division report?
This is a rather unique circumstance. I don't normally present the Finance Division report, but there's only 2 paragraphs in it. You have the document in your packet. But it highlights some major projects that Finance works on during the 4th quarter of the calendar year. So it's important to know we just finished our annual audit. We slid in before 12/31 for the annual State Controller's Report, which is a pretty involved reporting situation for the state of California. And then in the second paragraph towards the bottom, I just briefly mentioned, hey, we're getting ready for the calendar year 2023 tax reporting project. Cynthia had remarked about something called the Preservation of Benefits Plan, otherwise known in the IRS as an excess benefit arrangement for the people that get two different types of payments in order to receive their complete pension. They'll get two different tax forms from SDCERS. Those individuals will receive both a 1099-R, which is amounts paid out of the pension system, and then they'll receive a W-2 for amounts that are actually paid by the city of San Diego for those people that receive POB. As a result, we're in a mad dash from 12/31, the last day of the fiscal year, to create the tax files that we then securely upload to our tax reporting partner. And this information gets filed electronically. So there are three types of tax information we provide. We provide 1099s for our vendors that we're required to provide a 1099 to, the W-2s as aforementioned, and then the lion's share of all the documents we have to provide to our members, their beneficiaries, and other recipients. As a result, today is January the 11th. By IRS deadline, everybody's supposed to have those forms postmarked by January 31st. SDCERS has endeavored to provide the tax forms to the retirees as soon as possible. So as of right now, it's 10:36. I'm waiting for a new proof, the second proof of the 1099-Rs. But to give you an idea, the total number of tax forms, this year, we're going to provide 12,358 tax forms to vendors, members, and their beneficiaries. At this point in time, we're done with the vendor 1099s. I'm waiting for the updated proof for the W-2s, and we're waiting for the second proof of our 1099-Rs, which I will be working on today with two of my principal accountants. A big shout out to Rebecca Shi and to Fong Nguyen, who are working on the details, and I'm doing the reconciliation back to what we report to the government. So at the end of the day, I know I put a little blurb in there that, hey, we're working on this project, but the idea is that it is a very, very involved project that involves multiple divisions here at SDCERS, and the culmination is such that all of the retirees and their beneficiaries can get their 1099 as soon as possible. The reality is, if you want your 1099 as soon as possible, once we upload it to the portal, you will get it in the portal before you'll get it via snail mail. Just a shout out to get your portal accounts, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted. Any questions or comments from the committee members? Chris?
One question, Ted. When, in your memo, you say for the 4 months ended October 31 net investment, and you
Oh, the
have the
financial
returns
statements.
there?
Yes.
Maybe I'm looking ahead on the agenda here. Is that the next thing you were going to talk about? I'm looking at this memo, financial statements, October 2023. Is that what
They're
you're?
usually information items. If you have a specific question,
Yeah, my only question, it's a big picture question.
Yes.
How do you, I understand how you can do the mark-to-market investments or whatever. How does the private equity return on a quarterly basis? Where do you get that information from?
so for investment reporting purposes, for financial statement reporting and what we call interim reporting, not year-end audited reporting, we get everything from State Street Bank, which is the custodian. In financial services, there's the concept of as is or as received reporting, meaning we report the values that are in their system as of the end of that period. So the information you see, we're not going through and auditing interim information. So October 31st is interim information, and it's based upon the information that's recorded in the State Street system as of October 31st. I'm not going back to the individual reports for private equity because they only report on a quarterly basis. So I think the next set of reports that you're supposed to see is for the quarter ending, 9/30 or 12/31?
9:30. Yeah, 9:30.
So,
Okay, the reason I'm asking is I remember we have like a 3-month delay on the returns that we report, I guess, or they report, or whatever it may be, for private equity because of the complicated nature of valuing it or whatever. Is that essentially the same case here? Is there a 3-month delay on this when it relates to private equity?
yes.
Okay. And is it State Street that tells us what the value of those?
No.
No.
So what happens is the investment team gets the quarterly reports, which provide the updated NAV values. The investment team then reports that information and provides it to State Street Bank so they can update their system, which is why when I get to the end of the year, we start the investment reporting process using the State Street information, and then we go through the audited financial statements and reports for those lag reported assets, as you just point out.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Ted. We'll move on to section 5, questions and comments from the chair, committee members, and staff. Elvin?
So we approved the appeal earlier today. When and if, does that become a rule change? And how we facilitate benefits because of that court ruling? Or what is the process of that?
So kind of a parallel path to that was our discussions with fiduciary council to change our rules. So our rules have already been changed.
Oh.
And that was what I reported on, was the
Yeah.
62 members that we went back and recalculated their benefits.
Right.
For Mr. Farrington, if the board approves his appeal tomorrow, then staff will go and recalculate his benefit as well. And then there is one more member who also appealed, and we had asked that member to stay their appeal until we had the results of Mr. Farrington. So at that point, staff will then approve that appeal, and so there will be 2 more members that need to have their benefit recalculated. And then on a go-forward basis, we've already changed our policy. We changed the policy a little while ago.
Okay, and I guess I'm just asking for future reference as well, just as a learning exercise. So if those appeals happen and then we just say we get a different opinion in a hearing officer court, does that come here first, Board of Governance, for rules change first, and then it goes to the board? Or, just help me follow the process there first.
I think it depends on what the change is. So in this case, it was a change in staff's procedures, which is something that wouldn't have gone to the board in the first place.
Right.
So, I mean, if we took every procedure to you, we'd
be here
spend
for a
the
long
entire,
time.
you'd be here all day long and all day tomorrow just talking about how staff does their job. So this was part of our internal procedures, and so that's what has been updated, is our internal procedure on how to handle this.
Perfect. So we will not see something unless what?
In my time here, I haven't seen a court case that has made a change that ended up in something coming to the board, but I saw Greg reach, and I bet you he's got a lot more information because he's got many more years on this.
So this is really just talks about the governance structure. So our governing documents, we have charters, policies, and rules. And basically, the rules we have is because, as Chris pointed out earlier, sometimes you can have plan documents that are ambiguous. And there is something in the municipal code that says, if needed, the Board of Administration can actually define rules to help you administer the plan. So we've got board rules. And as Marcel said, there's also another layer of just more like how do we take those charters, policies, and rules, and in the case of the city, the municipal code, how do we implement that? So there's a lot of implementation rules that staff implements. And some of that is what we talked about today, is that sometimes we look at case law. Case law will come down and modify everybody's understanding, so staff just implements that case law. And so that's what Marcel's talking about, is we were looking at how do we interpret that case law. We've had a change of legal interpretation of the case law, which interprets the law, and we just react accordingly. And so we've taken care of that. So if it is something in the board's rules, that definitely will come back to this committee or the respective committees, and same with the policies and the charters.
So for future reference then, if something were to happen again in this case, we would just get an update afterwards, what affected, what operational rules were affected and how the change affected, and then there would just be a summary report.
Right.
Perfect, thank you.
And there is some judgment, I just want to be very forthright, is at what point is it a staff rule versus a board rule? And there is some judgment in there, and, how do we respect the board and just support them, but what needs to be elevated to a rule? What should we do? What should we document? And I think this goes to quite a few things that Chris talks about is, should the board rules be more explicit and expansive, yes or no? And there's definitely pros and cons to that. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer there. It's just really, how do you document and how do you get alignment and a common understanding on how we should operate the plan?
Right, and I think it goes both ways too. I mean, we as directors don't want to be in your everyday business telling you how to do your business that we don't know how to do, right, first and foremost. But secondly, I think it's our fiduciary responsibility to make sure that they're being executed and implemented. So I think the summary plan would be great. I wanted to, again, still trying to figure out where that line is, so thank you for the explanation.
And I just think, I mean, the nice part of this whole process is that if Mr. Farrington showed up or came in 2 weeks from now, there wouldn't be any discussion about it because it's that policy or whatever or procedure has been resolved, which is good.
All right, thank you. So we'll move to section 6, closed session. Johnny, are there any items? No items. And closed session report, nothing there. So we're going to move on to section 8, adjournment. We've come to the end of our agenda. This meeting is adjourned. Our next Business and Governance Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, March 7th, no earlier than 9:15 here in the SDCERS boardroom, 401 A Street. Have a great day.
Thank you, Tom.